Hello everyone, it's Steve with Aptera Owners Club. I was going to do another reaction video because John Stossel put out this video yesterday called Electric Cars Inconvenient Facts Part 1. And it's a lot of bad information, so I wanted to kind of give people good information about this topic and kind of go over his video.
Electric cars are having a moment.
Oh my God!
Electric car sales are up 66%.
Anybody want to jump in the back?
And now my president says the future.
It's electric, and there's no turning back.
To make sure of that, some states are banning gas-powered cars.
Gasoline cars are driving us toward climate chaos. We actually have to stop using fossil fuel vehicles.
California's governor made that an executive order.
We will eliminate the sales of internal combustion engines.
Governments everywhere say they plan to do that.
The government has a vision for a future where all our cars will be electric.
But this is just magical thinking. It can't happen. In this video and the next, we point out 5 inconvenient facts about electric cars that politicians and green activists just don't understand.
Electric cars are amazing.
Physicists like Mark Mills of the Manhattan Institute do understand. He says the trend to electric is a good thing.
But it won't change the future in any significant way.
Okay, so I wanted to stop there. Couple of things. They are talking about California's ICE ban. That happens, they cut it off before Newsom finished his sentence. And the ICE ban goes into 2035, as we know. And that's the sales of new cars in 2035 will have to be EV or fuel cell cars. That means that you can still sell used cars. That's not a problem. And since cars have a lifespan of close to 20 years now, because cars last a long time, we're going to see ICE cars in California until probably 2055. It's not coming anytime soon.
With respect to oil use or carbon dioxide emissions.
That's inconvenient fact 1. More electric cars will hardly dent oil use. If all of us bought electric cars, would it make any difference?
So the world has 18 million electric vehicles now. It could go to 300 million, maybe 500 million vehicles. I don't think it'll get that many, but that's the aspiration. That would reduce world oil consumption by about 10%. That's not nothing, but it doesn't end the use of oil for the world.
Because most of it's used for what?
Flying airplanes, driving buses, big trucks. The mining equipment that get the copper to build the electric cars is all oil-fired, and it won't change because those trucks last 40 years.
And even if all vehicles somehow switch to electricity, there'd be another problem because despite what we've heard,
further, faster, cheaper, and greener.
Electric.
Okay, so they said that getting rid of all passenger ICE vehicles and turning them electric would only reduce petroleum consumption by 10%. I looked everywhere. I tried to see where he's getting that from. That's just not true. This is in the United States. Millions of barrels per day. So 44% of all petroleum used in the United States is used for gasoline. And 96% of gasoline goes to transportation. And then 20% is used for distillate fuel oil. This is diesel. So gasoline is almost always used in passenger cars. Most trucks, buses, and large vehicles use diesel. So the vast majority of this 44%, so 96% of this 44% goes to passenger vehicles. That is not 10%. That's like 42%. So I don't know where that's coming from. It's 42%. And 42%, that 42% represents 8 million barrels a day. If you're burning 8 million barrels per day less of oil, that's not nothing. That's a lot. That's 8 million barrels per day. So maybe he's talking about worldwide use. And so I got the data for that. Here's the data for worldwide use. In worldwide use, passenger vehicles are 27%. Now that's less than in America because we have a lot of cars in America. We have lots of big cars. We like our SUVs. So passenger vehicles in the world are less, still 27%. And then if you look at freight, that's the big trucks and stuff, that's 17%. So anyways, if you converted all the world's passenger vehicles to electricity, you would reduce oil demand by 27%. So it's not 10%. So saying that it's 10% is one, incorrect. Two, saying that it's nothing is just crazy because it's 8 million barrels just in the United States less per day.
Cars are not all that green. One reason is because electricity isn't all that green. I'm amazed talking to people who are all excited about their electric car and they say, and I'm not polluting. And I say, where do you get the electricity from? And they don't know. They don't know that most of America's electricity comes from fossil fuels, natural gas and coal. Just 12% comes from wind and solar. Yet auto companies tell us
electric.
Okay, so that's true. This is the fuel mix in the United States. 60% of the electricity in the United States is generated from fossil fuels, mostly from natural gas, some from coal, and some from petroleum. And then 40% is nuclear or renewables. So that's true. And what he doesn't think about is that the fossil fuel consumption in a power plant is way more efficient than fossil fuel consumption in a car, because a car engine has to be made to deal with a lot of different speeds and to accelerate. It's not tuned for efficiency, it's tuned more for performance, whereas a power plant is tuned just for efficiency. For example, a gasoline engine in a car is probably about 25% efficient. The natural gas power plants are up to 60% efficient. So you're getting way more electricity or energy out of a natural gas power plant than you are getting out of a car. And, you know, he kind of has a straw man. I don't know how many people think that getting an electric car means that they are not polluting at all. Almost everyone understands the electricity has to be produced somehow. Now, there's a few people that may be closer to the truth when they say that, is like they have solar panels on their house and they're charging their electric vehicle from their solar panels on their roof. You know, those people are obviously polluting a lot less.
Vehicles in general are better and more sustainable for the environment.
she's a Ford engineer. She's not ignorant.
Well, actually, she probably is ignorant in the literal sense of the word. She's not stupid, but ignorance speaks to what you know. You have to mine somewhere on Earth 500,000 pounds of minerals and rock to make one battery.
And most of this mining isn't done in the U.S. American regulations.
Okay, so the Ford engineer said that in general, electric cars are more sustainable and better than electric cars. And he was saying that she's ignorant. I would say that he's also ignorant, because if you look at this, this is how efficient gasoline-powered engines are, gasoline-powered cars are. If you look at where you take the fuel, how much of the energy of the fuel ends up propelling the car forward. And so a gasoline-powered car, about 80% of the energy is lost to efficiencies, mainly engine efficiency, because ICE engines are not thermally very efficient. Most of the energy of the gasoline gets turned into heat, and very little of it gets turned into mechanical energy. Then you get drivetrain losses, parasitic losses, auxiliary electricity use, and about 16 to 25% actually moves you forward. If you look at an electric car, then you have like 10% charging losses, 18% drivetrain losses, and then you get about 87 to 91% of the original energy goes to the wheels, because a lot of it is recaptured by regenerative braking and stuff. And in an Aptera, this is like 95%. So way better. So when someone says that overall electric vehicles are more efficient, that's absolutely true. Now he's talking about the mining and all the minerals that are mined for the electric cars, for the batteries. And that's something that we've known about. Remember, we covered this about a year ago on this channel. We're talking about lithium mining and about nickel mining, cobalt mining. And cobalt, remember, was especially bad because half the world's cobalt is in the Congo, and it's so common in the Congo that you can just literally dig up the land and find cobalt. So there's a strong motivation to dig it up and sell it. So there's these quote artisanal mines, which is kind of a euphemistic way of saying that people are just digging dirt in random places without any safety gear. And a lot of it's being done by kids. And cobalt is really toxic. It's really bad. So this is a known problem. And lithium mining isn't great either. Lithium mining is mainly done in Chile and places like that where there's not much water, and they're using up what little water they have to mine the lithium, and taking away from the local farmers and polluting their water source. And that's also horrible. And so these are inherent problems with the electric vehicle batteries.
Make it nearly impossible. So it's done other places, polluting those countries. And worse, ingredients in batteries are mined in places that enslave people and use child labor.
An army of children are at the heart of the mining production, wearing no shoes and in the most wretched conditions.
Most Americans proudly driving electric cars don't know about this. They just don't want mining done near them. But wherever it's done, mining is a dirty business that adds lots of carbon to the air.
Okay. So yes, these are all terrible things. Like, the lithium mining, the cobalt mining, they're bad for the environment. They're bad for the local people. People suffer health consequences from it. And there's human rights abuses because of that. But let's remember, the same issues happen whenever there's industrial extraction of materials, such as for petroleum. When we're extracting petroleum from the ground, there's human rights resources. The two most widely known ones are the ones where they basically committed genocide in the Niger Delta, and they commit genocide of an entire people just to get them off the land so that they could extract the petroleum from it. And when they built pipelines, there was like forced labor, rape, torture, murder, relocation, stealing land from people. This kind of stuff happens and has been going on with petroleum for a long time. And then in terms of health consequences, most people that are driving gas cars, we're just so used to gas cars, they don't think about the health consequences of them. But being exposed to refineries leads to like leukemia, cancer, and brain development problems. If you live close to roads, children get asthma and lots of respiratory problems. And if you look at this in terms of children's development, they get developmental delays if they're close to major roadways like highways or other big roads. And it leads to dementia and all kinds of neurologic problems as well. So you get cancer, pulmonary problems, lung problems, brain issues, neurologic issues. And air pollution is involved in 6.7 million deaths in the world. And most air pollution is caused by the transportation industry. And the tailpipe emissions of cars is distributed throughout where we live. The emissions from power plants, which are also bad, but it's more easily controlled because it's a single source, and you can basically scrub the air a little bit more efficiently than the catalytic converters in cars can. And usually power plants are a bit farther away from population centers, whereas like roadways go right through the middle of cities. If you go to LA, there's all kinds of major highways that cut right through the middle of the cities. So lithium mining and cobalt mining is definitely bad for the environment. But petroleum mining and petroleum refining and burning petroleum in our cars, that's far worse. And if you care about kids and you care about people's health and you care about human rights resources, one is far worse than the other. Now, the best thing is to use a bicycle probably or walk. But since we have to have some kind of vehicle, you have to decide what the lesser of two evils is.
If you're worried about carbon dioxide, the electric vehicle is emitted 10 to 20 tons of carbon dioxide before it even gets to your driveway, before you drive the first mile.
Okay. Okay, so this is the same argument that we talked about when Graham Conway had this talk, The Contradictions of Battery-Operated Vehicles. Same argument. It's talking about how much embedded carbon is in manufacturing an electric car. And when you manufacture an electric car, because of the batteries and the mining for the batteries and manufacturing the batteries, there is more embedded carbon in an electric car. And he says 10 to 20, and that's correct. You know, the average is about 12. 20 is if you buy that Hummer EV, and that's with a ridiculously huge battery pack. But what they don't mention is that the regular car has about 5 to 7 tons too. So it's not that much of a difference. And then if you look at the crossover point, when you, as you drive an EV, it generates less carbon dioxide, whereas when you drive a gasoline car, it generates a lot of carbon dioxide as you drive it. So the slope is like this, and the crossover point is about 20,000 miles. Now they say later on in their video that it's 60,000 miles, and it kind of depends on what you use. Like if you're going to look at a Hummer EV and compare it to a Prius, it's probably 60,000 miles. But if you compare the average to the average, then it's 20,000. But yeah, if you want to stack the deck and you say, I'm going to compare a GM Hummer EV to a Toyota Prius, then the Prius is going to look flatter and smaller, and the Hummer EV is going to look more like this. And so it'll probably cross over at 60.
And plug it in the first.
But even in that case, where it's a Hummer EV and a Prius, it's going to cross over at some point if you drive it long enough. Be it 60, be it 80, be it 100, it's going to cross over if you leave it long enough. And most people are driving their car well over 100,000 miles these days. 20,000 miles is nothing.
Time.
Carbon dioxide produced by the mining and the manufacturing and the shipping.
Exactly. Volkswagen published an honest study. They point out that the first 60,000 miles or so you're driving an electric vehicle, that electric vehicle will have emitted more carbon dioxide than if you just drove a conventional vehicle in the first place.
Okay, so they talked about some Volkswagen study, and I couldn't find the Volkswagen study they were talking about. The Volkswagen study I could find was this. You can Google it yourself, type in Volkswagen electric vehicle carbon emissions. This is the one that comes up. The one that they're talking about doesn't come up, but you know, it says carbon footprint. They compared the results with internal combustion engines with a very clear result, and the clear result is that it's way better. So this is a gasoline car, this is a diesel car, this is an electric vehicle. So it's better. Is it like zero? No, of course not. It's not zero. And you see, this is the yellow part is how much embedded carbon there is. So this is 13 tons of carbon versus 7 tons of carbon. And then the electricity use is 13 here during the lifetime. The use of this electricity is during manufacture and things like this. And the fuel and power chains to make this gasoline. But then when you compare it, definitely the EV is less than the gasoline or diesel for the same size car. And then the other thing that they don't take into account is that when you look at carbon emissions, they're usually talking about carbon emissions of the tailpipe of the car. They don't take into the consideration the carbon emissions of extracting and transporting and refining it. If you do that, you have to add another 30 to 40%. So if you look at the slope, you'd have to add another 30, 40% to this slope, which would make the crossover point even better. Also, that doesn't take into consideration how much electricity it takes to make gasoline. This is just refining gasoline. We talked about it in this video about how much electricity does refining gasoline take. Refining gasoline takes a ton of electricity, and it takes about 2.3 kilowatt hours per gallon of gasoline that you produce. This is just in the refining. If you add the cost of extracting, exploring, and transporting it, it probably goes up to 4 or 5. 4 or 5 kilowatts would make an Aptera go about 50 miles. Actually, no, 150 miles. And so, and a regular vehicle would probably go about 50 miles from that. So if you just get rid of drilling for oil and refining the oil and transporting the oil, you can save the amount of electricity that it would take a regular EV to go about 30, 40 miles. And you can just leave the petroleum in the ground.
You have to own it for a while before the electric part starts to win.
You have to own it for at least 100,000 miles.
Well, he just said 60,000 miles, and now he says 100,000 miles.
And then the electric part wins by some. So it doesn't get you a zero emissions vehicle. It's reduced the emissions then by 20 or 30%, which is not nothing, but it's not zero.
No, it's not close to zero. In our next video.
But who here thinks that electric cars are zero pollution? No one. No one thinks that. That's not it. You just have to decide, is it better than gas cars? And by every metric, it's far better. It's far better than gas cars.
More inconvenient facts about electric cars.
Okay, the more inconvenient facts, I can probably predict what it is. It's probably about how the batteries run out and you have to replace them, and how the batteries themselves cause a lot of pollution at the end of their life.
Politicians make impossible assumptions about batteries and the electric grid.
Oh, he's probably going to talk about how there's not enough electricity in the electric grid, and that's also not an issue. All right, so hopefully you can see that there was a lot of cherry-picked data in that video, and you know, the thing about 10% of the petroleum is being used for cars, that's absolutely not true. And the fact that electric cars are not better than ICE cars in terms of efficiency, 100% not true, not even close to being true. There are problems with extracting the minerals for electric vehicles, but there are far greater problems with extracting petroleum, and petroleum extraction has to happen non-stop because we're constantly burning it. Now, even if you got rid of it, of course, that would only get rid of 40 to 27% of the petroleum extraction. And we're always going to need petroleum. Petroleum's needed for plastic and all kinds of stuff. Like, we're never going to get away from petroleum. But if you reduce the demand for petroleum, number one, gas will become cheaper, and there will be less of this. And so, and then we're talking about the embedded carbon, and when the switchover point is. The switchover point for the average car is going to be 20,000 miles. So as long as you drive a car more than 20,000 miles, you're going to be better off in terms of carbon dioxide emissions. And in their scenario, they're saying 60,000. So as long as you drive it more than 60,000, it's better. And then that doesn't take into, that's just carbon. That doesn't take into account all the particulates and other forms of air pollution that cause all these health problems in kids. So anyways, if people are interested, when he goes to Inconvenient Facts 3, 4, and 5, we'll kind of delve into them and look at the actual data behind them. All right. Well, thanks for watching, guys. Thanks to our supporting members, and have a great day, everyone.